Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Turn Bark time. I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bart.
And we have been here a long time. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but it's season 6, episode 6. That's right. We're here, and we are ready to rock. Bark, how we been?
Oh, I've been doing all right. I've entered into the 40s. I've left the 30s behind. So, wish a happy birthday to Mr. One Scott. I don't know what his middle name is. Scott Romulus Ramsey.
Like that.
Yeah, probably isn't that, but
No.
probably Remus. But anyway, happy birthday, Scott. We shared a birthday. I think it took me a number of years to realize that working in there. And thank you to the 2 best fake nieces that, I don't know, I can say money can buy, but I paid them for babysitting, so I guess that works.
Yeah. Bye.
So Caitlin and Kelsey out there living their best big girl dreams in the Tri-Cities. Woo.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Barker celebrated a birthday. He's just a young whippersnapper still, so you can tell. It's the beard, Barker. You just it's beautiful.
It's the white hair.
No, Barker back in the day. Barker used to have this solid, just like if he would have tied it, it would have given King Tut a run for his money. But anyway, happy birthday again, my friend. We took a week off last week. Just had to push, no big deal. And so we're back with this one. This is gonna be a fun one. Shout out! I'm gonna give a quick shout out to my girls' basketball team. Having a good time. They're a great group of human beings. It's really awesome to see them all play together and stuff like that. My A team's undefeated, which is super fun. We got some tough games coming up, but they're just good human beings. And I just want to shout that out because it's so much easier, too, as a coach when you're coaching good human beings along with those that are talented as well. And watching the growth just makes it that much more fun. So, but speaking of growth, speaking of birthdays, what are we talking about today, Mark?
We're talking about calendars, which had we recorded last week would have been a little bit more timely because it would have dropped on Lunar New Year. So, I'm trying to remember, did I push or did you push? I pushed.
You pushed. You had a fundraiser.
Oh, yes. We went and sold old football jerseys for $5 a pop.
What a good deal.
Made like $180 in like 45 minutes.
Love it.
So thank you to everybody who came out and bought 20-year-old football jerseys. So
yeah, cleared up some space and you make a little money off them. Love it.
Put it back in the coffers. It'll buy us like 1 or maybe 1.5 new jerseys. So.
I mean, really, yeah, that's the hard part about that. But at least you got something rather than nothing. So, but fell on Lunar New Year. For those of you who don't know, it is the year of the
snake. And if you're fairly specific, so apparently there's 12 animals in the Chinese zodiac, right? And so where are we? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're just about in the smack dab in the middle of the lineup. But it rotates through the 12 animals, but then it also rotates through 5 different elements.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Creating a 60-year
cycle. Cool.
I was unaware that it was that complicated. And what is the term for that? It is sexagenary. So, anyways,
that's cool. I wonder what my element is. Oh, it's right there. Awesome.
But that's why we were confused. We were at Costco not too long ago, and we were like, "Why is there so many like snake things?" And then I was like, pulled my phone out. I'm like, "Oh, it's the year of the snake this year." So
yeah.
And again, I think in America or in the United States, I think we use the term Chinese New Year instead of, I think it's being broadened out into Lunar New Year because
Yeah.
the influence of the Chinese calendar has expanded beyond, I guess, the home country, right? And is in Korea, Japan, Vietnam.
Yeah.
So there's a number of other places that do celebrate the Lunar New Year. So, which is also why our title card features the colors of red and gold, right? Because in that tradition, you hand out, people with kids hand their kids envelopes full of money.
Yep.
During the Lunar New Year festivities. So I thought about this because, like, I always think it's interesting that, right, we in America we're raised on the Gregorian calendar, right? And we don't know anything different other than the Gregorian calendar. And then it's always our frame of reference to look at other holidays. And like, we know that, right, Veterans Day is always going to be 11/11. We know that Christmas is always going to be December 25th. And then it's like Easter moves around for a minute, and like other ones like President's Day is like always a Monday.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Labor Day, Memorial Day.
And then we look at it and then it's like Hanukkah. Hanukkah has kind of like, it bounces around a little bit and you're like, being, right, obviously if you're not Jewish, you're like, well, that's odd. How does that work? And then like the one that's has the biggest adjustment is of course the Islamic holidays, right? Where like, if you sit there and you're not paying attention, you're like, wait a minute, I thought Ramadan was in the summertime and now it's in the fall. Like, what's going on? And so just kind of wondering about that and how arbitrary the whole system kind of seems.
Well, and that's the unique part about it, especially since, again, the term we're using for the calendar that most people know with the months most of our tens of followers are in the United States. We use the Gregorian calendar, not to be confused with Gregorio, who is my assistant principal, Greg Martinez. But that Gregorian calendar breaks down into what you know today, right? And it starts on January 1st of year one. So it's been 2025 years of using the Gregorian calendar. And then building off of that, but then where did that calendar come from, right? And that calendar builds off a previous calendar from Rome called the Julian calendar. And that one, again, roughly, and we learned a new word, where we learned a new definition, I guess, epoch, which is the starting point of these calendars. So the epoch for the Julian calendar, according to what I had, was January 1st, 45 BCE. Now, for those of you who grew up when we did, the letters we used after years were usually BC and AD. And I guess the more historic correct term now, or the a-religious term, I guess is what we call it.
Secular,
thank you. So CE standing for Common Era and the BCE standing for before the Common Era. But breaking these down, it was really interesting to kind of see like why we use these and what they're based off of. So Gregorian, like what we use, we base it off the solar, right? So we base it off of the seasons, right, and the sun itself and the Earth's rotation around the sun. The Julian calendar is the same. But like we just talked about with the Chinese, right, calendar or Lunar New Year, right, their calendar is considered a lunisolar, which is a fun word to say. Lunisolar.
Yeah, and so like I laugh because there's probably going to be an executive order to make it go back to BC and sorry.
Come on, Paul. Tell me about the good old days.
We've got to roll it back. Just like prices at Walmart.
Yeah.
So like the other thing that we kind of looked at, hi Wicket.
Yes,
my trusty puppy is over here deciding that he wants to come be part of the show, but he's off camera right now. And he stinks. You smell. With these calendars, like one of the things that like we've noticed is that the majority of calendars or many calendars end up having like 12 months.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's kind of odd, like why 12 months? Why come up with a dozen? Like why is that just kind of where everybody arrives at? And what it really kind of breaks down to is that I think a lot of that is influenced by, right? So the number of like new moons that appear during a calendar year.
Right.
And then one of the problems with the Julian calendar is the Julian calendar didn't have a leap year system built into it. And so I feel right now that I feel like the seasons are shifting. The calendar hasn't changed, but the weather, at least in Western Washington, is like shifting.
Yeah.
Like we're not getting rain until like almost November, and then like we're starting winter sports at the end of February. And if you're trying to play baseball or softball in March or late February in even in Eastern Washington,
it's worse.
It's gonna be flipping cold and covered in snow.
Yeah.
I remember a track season where the first part of the end of practice conditioning was grab a snow shovel, let's go uncover lane 1 so the sun will break through the ice. So the Julian calendar is named after Julius Caesar. And then the Gregorian calendar, which was adopted in 1582, what we would call CE.
Okay.
Was proposed by Gregory the 13th, Pope.
Yeah.
So Catholic countries immediately jumped on it and converted. And then Britain held out until, 1752.
Wow.
Yeah. So for right, a good long while. And I don't think Russia didn't convert until the 1900s.
Dang.
But I think they use, yeah, I was reading something else. The Eastern Orthodox Church used the Julian calendar.
Okay.
Like all the way up until that point, until like they kind of converted. But it's kind of an argument of like the Gregorian calendar has staying power. It kind of becomes like the calendar franca. I guess we could talk about like lingua franca, right? Like there's a language of trade.
Yeah, I got you.
So, as European countries have adopted the Gregorian calendar, and because of imperialism and their unwillingness to bend to new cultures, right? It has kind of become like just the calendar that we all do business by. Right. Doesn't make, not saying that it's right or like the best calendar. But even in 1912, China adopted the Gregorian calendar, and it runs in conjunction with the lunar calendar. Mm-hmm. So like they use a Gregorian calendar, but like they calculate holidays and festivals using the lunar calendar.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of them, it kind of like the Gregorian calendar is just like the secular calendar, and then we have other I guess they tend to be religious calendars that run concurrently with our Gregorian calendar.
Yeah.
And so thinking about it and kind of going like, why are the things the way they are? And it's like, it's because the calculations, it's not the Earth doesn't take 365 exact days. There's like a fractal, right? And those fractals add up. And so a lot of solar and lunisolar calendars. So the difference between a solar calendar is supposed to be based on the rotation around the sun. And so many of them have a built-in leap year system. And then the lunisolar calendars are roughly lunar, but have a mechanism to keep them in line with essentially with the Gregorian calendar, so that things don't shift too much.
Right. So what did Britain use the Julian calendar up until 1752 as well? Because you said Eastern Orthodox used it, but did Britain use it when you said 1752, or did you not find a?
Yeah, I think they used the Julian calendar, and they had to rectify. There was a 13-day difference, I think it said, between the two calendars.
The curiosity, ties to American history.
They just put their foot in the ground and we're going to get rid of 2 weeks. 2 weeks just
Well, so the interesting folks, sorry. So this is part of our side conversations that we have before we talk and everything like that when we just get caught up on each other's lives. But then we talk about just different points that we see. And so one of the points that got brought up by our friend Phil Frost was that there's a theory out there about how one of the biggest things would actually be 13 months is what we should have, and every month would be 28 days. When Barker pointed out that that would leave a lot of things like sliding around, especially because the lunar phases, the tracks of the moon move throughout those areas of the month and things like that, and so it wouldn't be a perfect system. But what's interesting is because I said, like, would we ever be able to adopt that system? Like, could figure it out? And someone just says new calendar, 13 months. And to me, it throws off everything, right? Like, because all of a sudden, like, the 4th of July isn't on the 4th of July anymore. It's moved further down July, or it's even in August, who knows? Um, and and so now I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, I'm wondering if anyone's ever done research on how the colonies reacted to the switch in the calendar. Because 1607, we set foot on Jamestown, or British set foot on Jamestown, right? And then you're running all the way up. You have all the colonies established by 1750. So what would it have been? And of course, you already have a mixture of other places that are in the world that are also represented there. But like you said, if the mother country and imperialism and colonialism is using this, what could you imagine the 2-month boat ride of coming to America and be like, hey, we're gonna switch calendars. I just hope everybody's ready for this. Like,
well, and it would gradually like trickle down because you would show up and be like, by the way, by decree of the king and parliament, it's we're just gonna jump 2 weeks. And so, like, what if it was your wedding anniversary? What if it was your birthday? Like,
yeah,
it's kind of weird to think about. Like, so at some point in history, like, people just decided, like, there were times where countries just straight up said, "Hey, we're changing the way we count time."
It's just nuts. Like, because and again, if you think about it, like you said, 15. What was it again? 1582. Okay, so 1582
is when the Gregorian calendar gets rolled out.
Right. And so if you think about it, like he rolls it out, like, could you just imagine like someone just saying, like, hey, we're gonna just switch the calendar? Because I mean, you figure, okay, that's how long it's been going on. Is that time period? So from 1582 up until 2025, we've been using this calendar, right? Like, I don't know, and especially in today's interconnected world. Like, I feel like in 1582, you make that change, like someone comes and tells you and you're working your field, you're like, I don't really care, right? It doesn't really affect me, right? But now with, like you said, like the business of the world, if anyone were to ever try and switch calendars, you would have to be a huge player in the economy of the world, but then that would throw off everybody else. Like, could you imagine trying to schedule stuff with other countries and you're like, oh, by the way, I'll meet you on, like, whatever the 13th month is because we've added a month. And they're like, what? And like, you have to have it like translate the dates, because like how Google does, as you move through like time zones, it switches it for you. So it's like you come to America and we have a different calendar, so it throws everything down.
Yeah, it'd be wild. I mean, yeah, because like we were talking about, like in the Jewish calendar, we're in the year 5,785.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. In the lunar Muslim calendar, we're in the year 1446. It's slightly different for the solar Islamic calendar, which would be the like Persian calendar, because I'm trying to think about this. I want to say that the one that seemed like it was the most like strictly lunar of like kind of like the more dominant calendars that I'm aware of is the Muslim calendar, like the lunar Muslim calendar. Like it straight up just says there is 12 lunar months. And so a year is between 354 to 355 days.
Right.
And
Well,
That,
sorry, and the
that's
date.
what causes the holidays to shift.
Yeah. Well, and then you said like the date, right? Like it's remind me again, it's 14 something. It's 14.
6.
Yeah. And the reason it's that is because it's based off of an event like the pilgrimage to Mecca or to Medina, right? The Hijra, right? So Muhammad has to leave Mecca to get to a safety where Medina has agreed to take him in, right? And that's the start of Islam. And
That's their epoch.
Yeah. And that is for those of you who don't know, that's I have 1622. Does that sound right?
For
the Hijra. And I don't know if you have that written down. That's just what I have. I have 1620. I have 622 CE.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you said 16.
No, sorry. No, I might, and I may have. I meant 6. I meant 622.
Yeah, that's right. Because, that's the
math. The mathematics.
For all my friends over there in the desert or our Muslim friends, yes, that sounds right. And I kind of think about this is one of the things about like science fiction, right? Like whether it's like Game of Thrones or it's Lord of the Rings, and like I think about Star Wars, because now people, as the Star Wars universe keeps growing and we keep adding storylines, like the epoch that they use for Star Wars is the Battle of Yavin. So like if you from episode 4, the first Battle of the First Death Star is the epoch. So everything, like you watch Rogue One, they talk about that it's BBY.
Right.
For the Battle of Yavin.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's just it's an interesting way to think about like all calendar systems have an arbitrary epoch point.
Right.
Where somebody just decided, like they threw a dart, they sat down together and said, what's important to us? Yeah. This is when it starts. And as I was looking at the Chinese calendar, like it was interesting because like it was listing like different epoch dates. Like from like different dynasties, like are we going to start here? Are we going to start here? Are we going to start here?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like theoretically, I mean, we could start the Frostorian calendar.
Yeah.
We could just make a new calendar and just put it on Reddit and it would probably take off, you know what I mean? And like we could name the months whatever we want and be less confusing because like we have the month of December, which is like Deci is the prefix for 10, but it's the 12th month.
12th month.
October should be the 8th month, but it's the 10th month. That's because we added like January and February later. You know what I mean? That kind of moved everything. Or no, we didn't add them later. Sorry, that's incorrect. We changed the anniversary point of the year.
Oh, the starting point?
Yeah. So like I think the better, they kind of said that like January and February were kind of like these like dead times.
Okay.
And then like so they're like, well, we can't just have like unnamed time.
Yeah.
And so they gave it names and they're like, well, and so apparently it used to start, the beginning of the year would have been like March.
That makes sense. That was spring, right? And that's a beginning.
Right. So and so like, that connects to something else. Like, so like the Persian calendar starts about March 20th. And I want to say it deals with like spring.
That's the spring equinox.
March
21 usually is spring equinox.
And so that would make sense why you would start in spring. Everything's growing, everything's being born. Mm-hmm. And so if we think about it from an agrarian standpoint, right, it makes a lot of sense why humans would build calendars that follow the growing season, right? It would make sense why, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, and you think about it, right? Like that would make sense of January and February being the dead times, right? Like I think of like Quincy here, right? Like we don't really get snow in December. We get some, and like we get it like cold, but like it's the January, the February where we see like the winter here, and then March and April come in, and March fights it every step of the way. You'll have really cold, really warm, really cold, really warm, and then in April kind of pushes everything out, and then we're into the roll and we're growing and everything like that. So, but I look at my brother runs apple orchards, right? And he's picking up until like November. And I always thought of like November as like okay, we're done. Like you pick all your stuff in August, September. And in Washington, we tend to have what we call Indian summer or Native American summer, where it goes a little bit longer than traditional, right? Like we get nice weather through October, and then we go for November through. So,
well, when I talk to people, they're like, "What is it like? What's the weather like in Western Washington?" I'm like, "Well, it's pretty much going to rain from Halloween to Easter."
Yep, that's fair.
I mean, I remember growing up, and it's like playing football. I'd be like, the weather's fine until we get like a week away. We get to like the week of Halloween, and then it just pours.
Yep, just gets gross.
Like, the one night that everybody's supposed to be outside, it just, woo.
Which is our.
And it did this year. We played our rivalry game on Halloween, and it rained terribly. And so
the school you're coaching for now.
Yeah, I mean and like thinking about it. Oh man, I had a point now. But I mean, it's the way that we're both educators, and so like the way that we view a year, right? We're halfway through our year.
Yeah.
We just hit semester break, where a lot of people who work in the regular business world, like who work in the real world,
yeah,
you're just starting a calendar year. So if you're talking about businesses, like you're starting off your first quarter of fiscal calendar, where for us, right,
we're halfway through.
Because we live in the Northern Hemisphere, our school calendar doesn't quite match up with the regular calendar year, but like our friends in the Southern Hemisphere, at least in Australia, like they'll start school at the end of the month, like end of January, end of February, right? And so like theirs follows, like it makes calendar system in its current fashion almost makes more sense for the Southern Hemisphere.
Right.
To go like the school year follows the calendar year more.
Yeah. Well, and that's the crazy thing about like again, because the topic's just calendars and we talk about this, right? Like let's look at a typical school calendar. And I always tell kids, I'm like, why do you guys get 11 weeks off, 12 weeks off for summer? Like, why is that? And they're always like, well, because we need a break. And I was like, preach. I'm with you. Like, I need a break too. But I was like, it's so that you can help your family, like harvest. Like kids weren't going to come to school, so why have school open? We're just gonna close it because we we know you're gonna spend the time on the farm. You're not gonna be working. And then I ask them, I'm like, are you spending the time on the farm now? And some kids say yes. There's some kids that have farms, but a lot of kids are like, no, that's my downtime. And it was cool because I showed them this. The OSPI did a thing, and I don't know if they're still doing it, but they offered a bunch of grants for balanced calendars just to see if school districts would run them. And I showed the kids the calendar, and I was like, guys, look at this. It's like, you get 3 weeks off in October. I was like, you still get Thanksgiving, you still get the holidays around Christmas and New Year's, right? And you get an extra week. I said, you just don't get 12 weeks in in June to August. I said, you get 5. So you get like the week of you get the last week of June and the 4 weeks of July, and then you come back to school in August. But I said, you're going to get a 3-week break in October. And so I was like, it's just an interesting, like different version of that calendar, right? Like something we don't necessarily need anymore. Like I'm all for summer break. I enjoy it, but I like, it's not a need anymore. It's not a necessity. So
yeah, we've moved away from that agrarian economy.
Sorry, Jay.
It's also interesting to think about, like, more and more the state is allowing smaller school districts go to 4-day weeks.
Yeah.
And so like that's another one where it's like maybe if we go longer on certain days and then we just cut the overhead cost of not operating a 5th day, does that help some of our smaller districts, become more economically viable?
Well, that and retaining teachers. I mean, we both work. Quincy's grown a lot since you and I both got here, and I use that as the example. Longview's been long established, and I don't think it's getting really that built up, is it? Like in terms of like the growth that Quincy's seeing, you know what I mean?
No, it's not that fast, but we are pretty much any piece of land, like we're building on pieces of land that my entire childhood my parents would have been like, nobody will build in the swamp over there, and
Yeah.
now there's no other option, so like we're having to mitigate stormwater and like
wetlands
and convert that into housing as much as we can, just because there's no other
Right.
options.
There's nowhere to build. Yeah. And it's like the farm fields that were up by the high school. Well, and the high school wasn't even there. Like it was the farm fields that were north of where we live, and then and those have been even starting to be turned into housing developments and things like that. But I'm trying to remember my point that I was going with this. It's one of those where when we look at it and we say, we're not doing this anymore. Like when do we switch? Who's the one to switch? Sorry, I remember my point roundabout way. That 4-day school week is retention for teachers as well. Because again, like what teacher doesn't want to only work 4 days a week? Yeah, you might work an extra hour, 2 hours a day, but you get 3-day weekends. And I think Waterville is my example. Waterville does like one extra day a month. That's a staff day. So it's like not only and to me, like those can be positives if you use them well. But like we have one coming up on Friday, and it's like if it's planned well, like that's some of my favorite days because I actually get to talk to adults and have these conversations about what's going on in other classrooms to try and figure out what's the best, options or how do I even improve my own craft. So
yeah, I wonder if we're gonna reach a point where if somebody came up and said, hey, like let's go to this, the Frostorian calendar of 13 months of 28 days.
Start it right now, the Frostorian calendar.
Would there be, I'm assuming there would be pushback, just like I kind of joked about, like going back to AD and BC that, right. Well, no, we want to do it the way that we do it. And it makes me think about like, even the way that we record date, like in America, we teach our kids to go, you go month, day.
Yeah. How you write the date.
A lot of people around the world go day, month, year. And apparently there's also some countries that go year,
day, month. So I got a good one for you on this one. So we were in, where was I? I was in New Zealand. I was in New Zealand or Australia, and we had tickets to something, and I had this mini heart attack on the bus because my ticket said 0307 2023, and I was like, these are for freaking March. No. And it was for July 3rd. And I was like, oh, never mind. We good. Everybody calm down. And everybody's just me.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I thought it was interesting.
No, it's cool. You don't think about it. And that's what I always love about talking with you about some of this stuff. Like, I mean, I go back to our like 4th episode or whatever, the history of toilet paper, right? Like, here's something that why do we don't know what that, it's a common thing that we don't think of. So.
Yeah. And it's also really interesting because like the majority of calendars, whether they're lunisolar or they're solar, generally, and even even the Islamic calendar, none of them advocate for the equal distribution of days.
Yeah.
All say like either like days have, now a lot of them say that months should have 29 or 30 days.
Egyptian's my favorite though, Bark. Tell them about Egypt. Come on. This is a fun one.
Yeah. I was looking through a bunch of calendars because there's way more calendars than I'm aware of.
Oh, there's tons, guys. If you Google calendars, guarantee we didn't talk about them all.
I live in a very small little sandbox. But the Coptic calendar has 13 months and, oh man, I forgot what it was. I think it was like,
it's 5 extra. There's
a 13th month, but the 13th month is only 5 days.
Yeah.
Or in a
they're like,
leap year, it's 6 days.
but how funny is that? Where it's just like, it's like, all right, we have all this. All right, Clyde, what are you gonna do with those last 5 days? Let's just make it another month. But there's only 5. Yeah, it'll be fine.
Yeah, like everybody else, like has like, we have the leap year. We add a year. We add a day.
Yep. To February.
To February. Some of the other calendars, like historically, just like every so often, they're like, yeah, we're gonna add a 13th month. You know what I mean? Because it balances it out.
Yeah, it makes it work.
And the purpose of those adjustments, those that seem like a random, like why would we randomly just throw in bonus days?
Yeah.
And it's to make sure that the calendar stays with like that's not the right word. I was gonna say like the circadian rhythm of the earth, right? Like
it's balanced with the season.
In rhythm with like the seasons that naturally occur and the phenomena that should be in those like time periods. Like December is, well, as far as we know, that's when winter solstice should be, right? The shortest day of the year. And that's why essentially there's like a 2 to 3 week window of like when Hanukkah starts.
Yeah.
And sometimes it starts like right on Christmas and other times it doesn't.
This year.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And so like sometimes those things happen. It's been interesting because like when I worked in the Middle East, we landed the first year. I landed during Ramadan.
Ooh.
And so it was like, welcome to the sandbox, and then welcome to being in a country that celebrates Ramadan, and you, by law, have to celebrate too. Which it wasn't that bad. I'm not.
Yeah. But it's still a culture shock.
I have way more respect. I have a ton of respect for Muslims who practice Ramadan in America while the rest of the country does not.
Yeah.
I think it takes way more fortitude and devotion to be like, I'm not going to eat or drink or have anything pass my lips from sun up to sundown while the rest of America is chowing down.
Yeah. I mean, it's some that would be, I just picture it like this. Like I try and do intermittent fasting and things like that, but I don't make it through without drinking stuff. Like not drinking water would be a really tough sell. So.
Yeah. And so it's just like, and you think about like in that climate, you're in the middle. It's the middle of summer. It's 120 degrees outside. And so for the time period, the other 1,300 years where we didn't have, artificial heating and cooling, like that was even more brutal. So I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of an interesting thing to kind of think about. Like at some point, will we just like randomly decide like we're going to put our foot in the ground, like new epoch?
Frostorian.
Yeah, the birth of Phil Frost.
Yeah, boy, that's the epoch. That's going to be a random epoch if I've ever seen one. We won't say his birthday on the air, but
I might have a shirt idea.
Sign me up. I'm in.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of one of those interesting things to think about. And then like I always think about space and like time travel, like space travel. Like Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Dune. Like you're arbitrarily going to say this one planet is going to set the rhythm
for the universe
of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Like, anyways, for those of you who didn't know, because I looked it up on Wikipedia, so it must be, if it's on Wikipedia, it must be real. A week in Star Wars is only 5 days, and a month takes 7 weeks. So, and if I'm wrong, my brothers will let me know in the comments. I'm sure
they'll lambast you.
Yeah, just like the other question, the great question of Star Wars: where does everybody go to the bathroom?
They don't. They've evolved beyond that, even though it's a galaxy far, far away, a long, long time ago. But somehow in the future,
get on that Star Wars expanded universe. Like, give us the first.
Yeah, give us the opener. Give us the Give us the creation story. Give us like a mankind story of all of us, right? But with Star Wars. So it'd be good. It'd be good. Good topic, Mark. That was a good one. I like this one.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. I was thinking about, like, we have all these calendars that happen, and we just, like, I think the people who make calendars in America just are adding more and more holidays because we want to celebrate something every day.
I don't disagree with you on that fact.
Because again, living in the Middle East, in technically theocratic Muslim countries, there was still very, very large Christmas displays.
Yeah.
They like holidays. They like to celebrate. People like to hang out and have a reason to meet with family and eat good food. So,
like, you think about it, like, if Christmas, if you're taking it from the Christian standpoint, like, Jesus of Nazareth is in, right? He's in Islam, right? He's just not the guy and the end all be all, and he's certainly not a part of Allah. So he's just a prophet.
He's a prophet. He's a dude. He's important. He's just not divine. So that's another term. Time takes on, like, theology.
I mean, it really could, like, that, especially drawing, like, could you imagine if we did something where, and maybe this is a discussion we have offline, but this is it. Could you imagine if we drew the lines of, like, all the religions and saw where they intersected and crossed and everything like that? Because I guarantee we're all going to find they have a flood. So, but anyway, well, folks, calendars, save that date. We're dropping tomorrow or today. We're going to drop today. You'll find out. So, Mark, anything else?
If it starts to rain, don't be the unicorn.
Preach, brother, preach. Such a good Scottish song. But to quote Jeff, I got you. So, until next time, guys, I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bart.
We're going to be here a long time. Have a good night, everybody.
Be safe.
And guys, just be well.